and welcome to our next episode of Big Data Talks, in which we have conversations with industry experts about the way in which data, machine learning, and artificial intelligence are changing the way we live. My name is Jan-Willem Middelburg, and I will be your host today. I'm the author of the Enterprise Big Data Framework, which is hosting this series of Big Data Talks today. You can always watch back this recording of this discussion on YouTube, the Big Data Framework website, and the podcasting platform on Apple Podcasts. Today, I am super excited to announce my next guest, Harish Sriraju, who is a distinguished engineer in product management at Verizon. I met Harish earlier this year during our Big Data Days virtual conference, and I was truly impressed with his speech around how to create in-app recommendations. So I thought it would be a very good idea to invite him today and pick his brain a little bit more. Harish has been in product management his entire life and is currently at Verizon, the telecommunications company in the US. Harish, welcome to Big Data Talks. Absolutely a pleasure to have you today.
Thank you so much. Really excited to be here and chat with you. So I know the previous conference, I had a great time speaking about like in-app feedback and how it can be leveraged. So really excited to speak with you again.
Absolutely. I'm really looking forward to our conversation. I was super impressed when I first met you, and I thought I would like to get your perspective a little bit more on a number of different topics as a follow-up conversation. I always need to say that obviously for all of our guests, it is the rule that they express their own views and not necessarily their companies, so we can dive in any kind of topic that we would like to go into. So, Rich, during the Big Data Talks, you gave a very inspiring talk, but what you didn't really cover at that moment was how did you get to where you are today? How did your journey go to becoming a product management expert? So maybe can we start with learning a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, sure. I think early in my career, I was in an explorative stage, I would say. So I started my career as a software programmer, actually, and then pivoted to investment banking because I was passionate about finance, and that caught my attention. And after spending like few years in banking, I decided to actually leverage both my product development skills, my software programming skills, and also like my business finance skills. So I made that switch to product management because I thought it's a great career path for those who want to like bring both fields together, like business and technology. So I think that stood out to me, and since then I've been focusing on product management, built like various different types of products, helped out like some startups on the side as well to build products. So I think I also like the fact that it has an element of creativity. So you're always constantly thinking about like new features, new products. So I think that keeps me intellectually stimulated as well, I would say. And there's so much more to learn constantly. So I think these are the reasons, and this is sort of like my journey so far that actually made me from a software programmer, investment banker, non-profit, healthcare, and now to product management at a telecom company. So
very interesting. What I find very interesting in your journey is you've been through all these different fields. And I can only imagine that the world of investment banking is completely different than the world of telecommunications you're in today. But the main point that you brought up is creativity. Can you explain a little bit more around how that creativity plays a role in all the decisions that you make on a day-to-day basis? How can you put that into products and code?
Yeah, I think like one thing I really like about my job is it's not, there is like some bit of like unstructured or a blue sky kind of like approach as well, where you're constantly challenged to come up with new product features, new product ideas, or even like how to make customers aware of these features as well. So like innovative marketing ideas. So I think there's a lot of like creative element to it because we always want to surprise the user with new product ideas or new features. So I think that keeps me very excited. And so that's from a customer point of view. And then from like engineering point of view, you can come up with like multiple solutions to approach a particular problem. And so they're always constantly evolving, different trade-offs. You're also working very closely with the design team to bring up the best user experience. Again, when you're working with design team here, a lot of creativity is needed to present the same kind of information or data or features in a much more engaging fashion, I would say. So here a lot of creativity is needed. So that actually like keeps me excited, and it's not boring in some way. So every day there are new challenges, I would say.
Yeah, well, I'm pretty sure that's every day a new challenge, because it also leads towards the fact that people want these changes, these updates, every single release, every single new deployment. You always are under pressure to provide new and exciting elements towards your products. So one of the things that I find interesting, and I also found that very interesting when you talked about this earlier, is where does data come into play right here? Can we start to see and measure what people actually want if we look at the consumer data?
Yeah, no, I think as a product manager, one of the biggest challenges is to, or your responsibility, I would say, is to be the voice of the customer, really. Like in some way, you're representing the customer in your team and in your company, and saying that, okay, this is what the customers want or need, and how do I make that happen? So, especially when you're dealing with a large customer base or different types of customers, sometimes it's really hard to understand what the customer needs. So you can definitely do qualitative studies or quantitative, but ultimately you're dealing with data when you really want to understand from a large user base what the customers need. And second thing is, a lot of times I feel people have like conflicting opinions. People have varied opinions in the team. So is it the loudest voice that takes over and says, okay, let's do this? Instead of that kind of approach, you can actually say that, hey, this is what the data is saying. So instead of relying on the loudest voice or the most influential person in the room, you can actually rely on data and say that, okay, this is what the customers want, and hence let's decide based on that.
Yeah.
And so ultimately you're like sort of like removing the human error or removing any kind of biases to really understand what the market needs are and make decisions. So I think these are the two things I would say why data driven product management is like really fascinating. One, be the voice of the customer using data. That's the only way you can do that apart from interviews, etc. And second, remove any kind of like human biases and rely on like a more methodical approach to product management.
Yeah, I think that's a really fascinating approach to think about, and obviously I want to talk a little bit more around how do you do that, because it all sounds so super easy to say, we're going to use data from consumers in order to start enhancing our products. But I know, and you probably know this way better than I do, that this is a completely very difficult task. So I can imagine that in your line of work, you must be collecting massive amounts with all kinds of different features, all different kinds of metrics, typically very, very large data sets. So how do you start with that in your journey of deciding we should make this switch, or we should make this feature enhancement? What is it that you're looking for in this tremendous wealth of the data that you collect?
Yeah, I think like first of all, data collection is like super important. Sometimes there is a chance that we miss out on essential data, and the tricky thing is with data is, and also with like data science evolving, is sometimes at this moment you might think certain data is irrelevant, but the advancement in data science, this particular data might be useful, let's say 5 years from now or 10 years from now, who knows? So I think there is a bit of ambiguity as well. So one is like, obviously you should keep privacy in mind of the customer. At the same time, also ensure that you're collecting the appropriate amount of data that can help you make the product better. So I think managing trade-offs with cost, for example, also, like if you collect massive amounts of data, it's unnecessary cost burden to the company or the team. So trade-offs between cost is one, trade-offs in time, in terms of time, where you could actually be spending all that engineering resources in making product better in terms of adding features or functionality, rather than focusing on data, which you don't know if it will lead to substantially better results or help the product in any way. So because of the ambiguity. And then the last, privacy factor as well. So ultimately you're making these trade-offs in terms of cost, time of or engineering resources, and privacy, and ensuring that you manage all of these and collect the right amount of data. So that's the first step. And once you collect it, like, okay, one of the challenges that I face personally is, data is sitting in different places, data silos, people refer to as. How do you, in silos, you can still extract some meaningful insights, but it becomes more powerful when you can aggregate or bring different data sources together to draw like even more like deeper insights. So I think that's like a next big critical challenge, I would say. How do you bring different data sources together? And lastly,
do you have an answer to that question? Because you're obviously asking a question that I think a lot of people are struggling with. The data is there, but it's disparate and it's in different sources, and it's very difficult to aggregate that. Do you have a solution, or at least how do you tackle that problem?
Yeah, I think there are like definitely now new tools that are out there. I would say like some are even like open source softwares as well, where they're able to easily provide like integration with different data sources. So let's say you can establish, like if there are like a different databases, you can establish a connection, and then they allow you to easily make that integration so that you can start extracting information. I think the biggest challenge with any of these tools is, the security aspects. Let's say some data is within your network and you can easily access it. Sometimes it's sitting outside with, external partners, vendors, or some other different sources. And so security becomes another challenge to how to integrate the data. But yeah, like I think over time I've seen over the last 3 years at least, like more and more tools are coming into picture where they're able to help you combine these data sources, integrate them. And so almost like, they're trying to remove the need for big data teams who can manage these things. So data DevOps or data operations are making it easy by bringing this data together. So I think that tackles some of the challenge, I would say, in terms of silos.
Very good. So Harish, I'm a techie as well, or at least always interested in new technologies. And what you just mentioned is that you said there's a variety of stack of new tools coming up that you think can help with this problem. Are there any kind of cool or new exciting technologies that I should be looking at?
So in terms of like data operations, like at least I personally like these dashboards. Like, you have like, for example, Tableau or ThoughtSpot or like few others. So they are able to, easily integrate with data sources and then get them to sort of like visual dashboards. And then there are these like sort of like ETL tools, I would say. So you have like, for example, softwares like KNIME in some way, KNIME. They help with, ETL or cleaning of data and things like that. So there are a lot of like visualization softwares, ETL softwares, and then you also have like, you can use some of these tools, both like visualization or ETL tools, to even run like simple analytics as well, or sometimes even advanced machine learning softwares. There are restrictions in terms of how much data they can consume, etc. But like, the basic analysis, some of these tools can provide those as well, like basic predictive modeling, basic like machine learning algorithms and things like that.
Yeah. So you're referencing a whole stack. I'm familiar with most, obviously. I also heard some new names.
Yeah.
but one of the things that I always find difficult, and this is also a conversation that I had with a lot of the previous guests that I had on this podcast, is you have a 9 to 5 job, maybe even more hours, I don't know. There's all this new technology coming to market almost every single year. There's new and exciting new features. What kind of steps do you take, and what's your routine to make sure you stay up to date with all this ever-changing world?
Yeah, that's a good question. I feel I struggle with this as well because there's so many cool softwares on an everyday basis. So one of the things that at least recently I've been doing is whenever I attend conferences, I make sure I go to the software booths and just have a chat with them, and sometimes schedule a call after the conference just to see what is out there. Sometimes it might be a good fit or not, but like I think willing to be open to just checking out what are the software offerings out there. I think that's like really important, and then evaluating, okay, if there is a fit or not, if there is a gap in your team that software can fit in. So that's one of the ways that I have at least been interacting with new softwares, and I'm pleasantly surprised by how many are out there. The challenge is, apart from conferences, I really don't know if there are any other good ways. Like, I wish there was a great platform where I can, interact with different softwares and they can help me understand if this is a good fit or not. So I am not aware of any software solutions or platforms where I can see a list of different solutions. I know Product Hunt is a new upcoming area, but again, it's not so much for enterprise software. It's just like bunch of like different new products. I find that a little more interactive. I can see some screenshots, I can see some comments from people. So I think Product Hunt is a good platform to generally get a good sense of what people are thinking about new product ideas. But I wish there was a comprehensive platform for all the enterprise softwares in a very engaging fashion, almost replicate a conference booth in some way.
That would be a good idea. So maybe someone is listening today and we just gave them $1 million idea to develop something for which there's a desperate need. So you just mentioned that it's very important to kind of keep this open mindset, to keep learning around new technology, to kind of open your mind, visit conferences, look at different solutions, even if it's not necessarily a fit for you at this moment in time. Would you say that from a kind of a personal characteristic, that this open mindset is a key what makes a good product developer?
Yeah, I think I then generally have that kind of curiosity. I feel, ability to talk to people, keep learning. And I think, let's say if I talk to someone from an enterprise software, even if that product is not relevant to my team, I can also see what features that they're developing, how have they designed the product, how do they, interact with the customer to sell their software. So all of these things are still a great learning for me in terms of product management. So that's one of the reasons I feel, even if it's not a good fit and sometimes, I'm spending quite some time talking to them, it's still some kind of learning from a product management perspective. I deal with consumer software, but it's still, ultimately you want to see those basic principles. How do they sort of pitch the product to the user? How are they getting them onboarded? How are they building the features? How are they designing the features and things like that? So it's always great learning to, interact with folks.
Yeah, I can really see from yourself that you're very driven by kind of making sure you explore new technology on a regular basis. A lot of the people I had on this podcast, and might not be a surprise, are all very much driven by data in their daily work. But what I also found, and that's maybe also kind of a side guess, so I'm kind of testing a theory here a little bit, is that people who are very data-driven in their work also are very data-driven in their personal lives. So last week I had a conversation with somebody who is obsessed with data in his sports to really make sure that he uses the analytics to make improvements and to adjust his training plans, etc. So I thought that was a very interesting theory. So I'm kind of going to test that with you here as well. Do you also take a lot of data-driven decisions in your own personal life?
I would like to say I do. I feel mostly, a lot of things. There are things that I really care about. There are things I don't care about and ignore. So if I really care about something, then I actually try to listen to the experts, understand, at least the science behind it, and so try to focus one on experts, and also experts are also bringing that kind of data validation with them. So I think that's always the best way to improve. And recently, just to quote a simple example, I'm trying to be more health focused now. So I've been listening to various podcasts from researchers in Stanford University. And so what is fascinating is every single word they say, or a recommendation they give, they always supported by their research and data. They never say.
So I'm very interested in that. What's the number one lesson in the podcast that you hear from the last few weeks, health related, that you thought, wow, this is interesting?
Yeah, I've been listening to Dr. Andrew Huberman, based out of Stanford. So I've been trying to read about the science of, for example, gut health, or for example about alcohol or sleep and things like that. So about the gut health, one fascinating thing I learned was overall, you have to keep simple rules. There's so many variations in food, so many different factors. So it's really complicated to really pin down what is the exact best diet for you. But broadly speaking, I think the guest for this podcast mentioned plant-based, fiber-based diet is a key to having a good gut health. And second thing, how your gut health impacts your cognitive abilities as well. So those things are very fascinating to me, to just hear from an expert, and especially those. I love people when they back everything by data or research. Even in my non-profit days, I came across few public health experts like that, because nowadays everyone sort of talks like an expert, right?
Yeah.
And so it's really hard to really discern who's accurate, who's right, etc. So if someone's backing it up always by research, it just adds to that credibility, especially in the age of social media, etc.
Yeah, I couldn't be more right, and I was just going to bring that up as well. There's so much information nowadays, where a lot of that information is really truthful and very good. But there's also obviously a lot of information that's not so good nowadays, and the misinformation that we're getting. So I fully agree with you. I think a lot more people should back up their opinions and facts by looking at the statistics or the data that really supports that. It's just a shame that not a whole lot of people tend to do that, and that kind of adds towards the debate. Maybe that's also,
I think also
kind of a good bridge towards one of the main topics that I wanted to talk to you about. You're obviously an expert within product development, making sure that there's a creation of new and innovative ways and solutions. What I'm particularly interested in is what kind of role does data play into that? So if you were to kind of be able to come up with some of the research that you just mentioned, what makes good product development? What is the facts that are necessary to make sure that people actually start to love a product?
Yeah, so I think as a product manager, you're oftentimes, managing your resources, engineering resources, and your time, etc., costs as well, and at the same time keeping consumer interests in mind. And there is always that tendency to, sometimes overdevelop things as well, or develop things that the customers really don't care about. So those are the two factors, right? Ultimately, you want to provide most value to the user for the amount that they're paying for. So how do you decide, what the customer wants? And then once you know that, then you manage your engineering resources, etc. So here is where, most of the debates happen in the team. Like, okay, a certain feature, should we develop this or not? Do users care about this or not? That's one. Second is, if there are like, let's say 10 features, or sometimes it's not just features, you're not just looking at features, but you're looking at features, sometimes marketing efforts also take like engineering resources. Then you have performance, like to remove crashes or bugs and things like that to just make the product better. And then you have design related features as well. So you have like different buckets. So within each bucket, you have to prioritize the feature. And across all these buckets also, you have to sort of have like some kind of like hierarchy. So that's like a, most challenging process, I think, for a product manager to really develop like a good roadmap. So I think ultimately most of the decisions, most of the data-driven decisions come into play on how do you prioritize these, how do you develop your roadmap.
Yeah, very, very
and
interesting
here,
point that you bring up, because this is something I heard before. And one point really triggered me. You said, this is what is causing a lot of debate in our product teams to kind of balance these different features. I want to pick your brain and your expertise a little bit further on how do you structure those debates? Because you're in a team, there's obviously people who are more senior, there's people who are more junior, but sometimes the more junior people can come up with the best ideas that might make a product 10 times better than it was before. What I'm very interested in is how do you manage a debate like that, and how do you facilitate the best possible outcome?
Yeah, I think I'm lucky that my team has that open culture of coming up with ideas, and people are at least willing to listen to you. They might not always agree with you, so I think the first thing is you have to create that culture, like as an individual or like a leader of a team, like for everyone to have that safe space to just like throw any idea, no matter how good or bad that is. So that's one. Second thing is easily ability to disagree with folks, because sometimes, people get touchy about ideas. People have invested a lot of time sometimes with a certain idea. So in some way, being okay with, disagreeing with others in a respectful way, I think, again, that is like super important. And the third is like, data-driven, hypothesis-driven approach, where you're not approaching from like, okay, I'm 100% confident this is going to work out. You just say that, okay, maybe this is a hypothesis. This is an assumption. Now, I have tested this assumption. So best thing is if you test out the assumption before taking it to your leaders through either qualitative surveys or interviews with customers, or, with data, you actually can say that, okay, the data is saying this story. And sometimes the data doesn't really tell a story. It just presents you with objective information. But you have to stitch different data sets to sort of present a story or a narrative. So I think the best thing is to approach that, hey, this is my assumption. In some ways, I have tested in these ways. Now you tell me, what do you feel? Should we test further? Or do you think we can take a risk in terms of implementing it? It's okay to fail if we implement and no one uses it. At least we learn from it. But the idea is to sort of, in a low cost environment, in a low time consuming environment, do these experiments or validations to really come up with like the best ideas. So these are some of the things that I would say best practices to sort of like encourage everyone to come up with great
Absolutely.
ideas.
I think that's some very, very good insight, and especially what you mentioned in terms of the culture and sometimes just experimenting, seeing if something works, but also backing up your ideas at least with some form of data, I think are some very valuable lessons that I think everyone who's listening today can start building upon within their careers in product management as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to add two things, quick things. One is also ability to say that I don't know, like I think sometimes where going wrong with confidence is often rewarded. I think in this age, sometimes it's great to say that, hey, listen, I don't know to answer to your question, but I'm going to find out and come back. I think, a lot of times people struggle with saying that I don't know, because they might think, people will judge. And the second thing is sometimes doing a post-mortem of, a failure. I think that is also missing sometimes, where it's okay to fail, but after the failure, really going deep dive into why did we fail, I think sometimes that is missing. So these two things I feel, we should do more of
So
it.
do you try to do, especially on that post-mortem part, do you try to do that with every failure in your own teams, or how do you address that?
I think it's a tricky thing, I would say. I don't think I have gotten to better at it, and in some way I have to think more about it. But at least like some big failures, yeah, like we do talk about it and say that we own up to it. First thing is owning up, saying, hey, listen, I failed for these reasons. So being open about it. So the person who failed should actually, or who was responsible, should actually be a little more proactive, because if they start saying that I failed, then others can also be okay with saying, yeah, these are the things you could have done better, etc. Because otherwise it could easily become like a finger pointing thing, like, oh, how did you fail? And then it becomes an unhealthy competition. So maybe, being open to your failures and talking to the team that, hey, these are the reasons I failed, and let's encourage that and get others to also, participate in those discussions.
It's from my, let's say, from my personal experience, one of the hardest things to really structure is to kind of create that culture in which people feel that they have the ability to speak up if they messed something up, because it's kind of owning up towards your mistakes. And setting up that safety culture is tremendously difficult. You work in a very large organization where there is people coming and going, probably also within your teams, and there is quite probably a very strong organizational culture that you alone might find very difficult to change or to make improvements to. So how do you balance that fact that you want to make sure that these things are happening with the fact that you're working in a larger company where there's a lot of due processes that are already in place?
Yeah, definitely. I think, processes are sometimes a roadblock, but also at the same time, processes are there for a reason. And so really understanding that, why certain processes in place and what are they trying to avoid, etc. One is like, general chaos. If there's no process, it's hard to manage like a large team or a large product, etc. But at the same time, keeping that balance where sometimes you try to tweak the process a little bit. I think, again, I've been very fortunate where even within the larger organization, when I've presented ideas, like people are very welcoming and supportive. I think I've always been an initiative taker. I enjoy and thrive in that environment where, I like to go outside of my own responsibilities. Maybe you could say if it is out of boredom, maybe you could say out of, enthusiasm or curiosity, whatever it is, I like to break that boundary of, this is the role I need to operate in that confined zone. So not only for my team, I try to help out other teams. I try to help out the entire organization by understanding what different challenges the teams are facing. And sometimes it's just easy recommendations that you can make to make things work better. So to just answer your question, again, ability to always like help others, focus on, making simple recommendations, and constantly, sometimes you have to constantly iterate it in different forums to draw attention to it. And so these are some of the things that you could do even if you're working in a large organization to make things happen. And trust me, I feel even though I'm in a large organization and I'm one among like hundreds of thousands, I feel that my voice is heard because of the people who are open to listening. And second, I am always like pushing the idea, if it's like not one leader, then I go to another leader, then, I keep bringing it up in forums. Ultimately, people will say that, okay, yeah, let's try this out. So you have to have that patience as well and not get disappointed.
Absolutely. So I think what you're saying is absolutely probably one of the most important sentences that I heard in this hour is, I feel heard, and I feel that people do something with that feedback that I give you. And I think that kind of exemplifies the fact that you're in this safety culture already. where you feel that these kinds of things matter. And I think that's probably one of the most important things to be successful in product development. Good. One of the other main things that I wanted to pick your brain up a little bit more is obviously new technology, because in product development, you are constantly balancing new features, new kind of cool and exciting technology that's coming into the market. So I kind of want to pick your brain a little bit around some of these new technologies that are coming and how they're going to reshape product development and new products that we're likely going to be using in the near future. And I'd like to start with a very simple development that everyone is talking about, I think especially within your industry, and that's 5G is coming. It's coming very, very fast. Is it going to tremendously change our consumer experience? And what is going to be the impact specifically for product development?
Yeah, no, that's a very interesting question, and we are at the cusp of sort of like Web 3.0, right? Where you have with this whole conversation about like metaverse or IoT, and then you have like, for example, AI, and then you have like blockchain, and then 5G supports or enables a lot of these things. So one exciting times that we are in the cusp of Web 3.0, and of which 5G also plays a very critical role. I think the biggest thing, from a consumer point, what I'm most excited about is the whole idea of metaverse and augmented reality, virtual reality, and a lot of this is enabled with 5G technology, because faster speeds, low latency can actually help make some of these things happen. So I think I'm very excited about augmented reality. I love information. I just want to consume as much information as possible. So I can totally imagine if I'm just walking down the road with AR glasses, I can just get like a lot of information about a lot of things. So I'm particularly excited about that.
Have you already worked on
strongly
projects or developed anything in that specific area, or is augmented reality something completely different from the products you're currently developing? Can it be integrated?
So definitely, I mean, we are thinking about, at Verizon, first of all, there's like a lot of work going on in that space. For my team particularly, again, I don't see like direct parallels where we can suddenly use those, but I think there is still some application to a limited scope. And we are also like slightly, it'll take, at least like couple of years to get there in terms of getting metaverse more mainstream. So at least in my work, I have dealt with like some augmented reality ideas, because one of my responsibilities, apart from managing my own product, is to come up with like new product ideas. And here we look at new technology, new product innovation with augmented reality. So I have dabbled in some of that. But I think one thing I am always cautious of is, although these things present a great opportunity in terms of new markets, new consumers, etc., new revenue, I think you can't lead with technology first approach. If you take technology as your core for innovation, I think sometimes that might not lead to best results. I think you have to take a consumer first approach, where, okay, this is what the consumer wants, and now let me try to fit in the technology. And there's always this danger.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point, and kind of brings me towards one of the other kind of things that I wanted to get your view on a little bit more, and that is, you're in my opinion completely right that we should never let technology drive the things that people want. So there's obviously a whole lot of debate around it, but is there a demand, or is there a need for these kinds of more augmented or virtual reality, especially in light of the fact that in the last, let's say, 5 years, there's been a lot of debate around the role of social media in our lives and on mental health, etc. What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, so I mean, for, like just talking about social media, I feel there was an inherent demand um, to, in some way, engage with people online because it's like very valuable as well. I mean, I know social media gets a lot of like
Yeah.
negative attention, but I am, pro social media in the sense that I get entertained quite a bit. I learn quite a bit. I read quite a bit because of social media. So again, I'm of the view that technology is not deterministic, and I strongly believe that it's up to humans to make technology into a product and engage with it in our lives. Technology itself is not good or bad, I feel. I mean, there could be exceptions, etc. But ultimately, I feel it's what we make out of it. So that's the case with social media in some way.
Can I ask one
And
follow-up question
the
on that?
challenge
Is,
with always taking
because you and the teams that you're running are actually creating these new products. So one of the key questions that always really interests me is how do you build in certain ethical considerations? So I fully agree with you that it's ultimately not the product, it's ultimately the people who use it. But at a certain point, it's also the responsibility of a product development team to make sure that applications or specific services cannot be used or misused by people who shouldn't have access to, let's say, for instance, data. So when you discuss these kind of ethical considerations with your team, how do you make that trade-off, and how do you kind of bolt in a lot of these ethical considerations in the products that you're developing?
Yeah, I think that's definitely a tough question because it's a very ambiguous question, right? And I came across this Harvard course. I'm blanking out on the name of the course, but it was called Judgment or Judge, I think, where they present like different ethical dilemmas. Where if there's a train coming, would you push one person on the railway track to save like thousands of lives? So those kind of, there are several scenarios you can keep building off on. So I think like those are something very fascinating to me. Like, how do you make these ethical choices? I think one is, if you have regulations, it makes it easy. That's why I feel some of the companies out there constantly actually like regulations because it makes their job easy. They don't have to worry about ethics, that, okay, these are the regulations, I'll follow them. Second is, there is some institutes that do create like ethical frameworks for AI. I think that's like a hot topic now, where more institutes are discussing like, okay, what should be the ethical frameworks for artificial intelligence, privacy, and things like that. And the second is
so I've been involved in projects in Europe, and in Europe, the European Union is now very closely looking at creating what is known as the AI Act, or the Artificial Intelligence Act, which is trying to regulate what kind of design criteria companies should take when they develop these kind of products. In the EU, they actually want to go even one step further and basically give a stamp of approval, or kind of a seal, to allow other companies, let's say from the US or from anywhere else in Asia, before they launch a product in a market, that a particular product or service should have that stamp of approvals, which basically means that those things would get audited before they can be launched in a particular market. Do you think that's the right approach in terms of, should governments play a role in this regulation debate, or do you think it's going two steps too far? What's your view?
Yeah, I think it's a little confusing to take a stance either way. I think it's a gray area, very subjective. So I don't have like a straight answer to it, but I think definitely there should be like regulations and guidelines because there's always a chance for abuse, etc. But at the same time, sometimes if let's say even practical purposes, right? Like getting approvals for each and every AI model or a product can be a daunting task for both companies and government. Like, so practically, how do you implement it? Because let's say tomorrow, every month I'm coming up with like new features. Okay, so does it mean like every month I get an approval?
I think you're basically hitting the nail on the head in the sense that it's very, very difficult to control that, right? Because I don't know how many deployments you do in Verizon, but it's probably multiple a month. So how do you keep track of what is the versioning and the latest part? So that's a very good topic to bring up.
Yeah, and also like it needs small tweaks as well. One is like new features or big products, etc. But like even if you're making small tweaks in algorithms or AI models, how do you then like again get approvals for these? So I think there are practical considerations, and to what extent like the government would want to get involved and interfere. So I think I would say it's a gray area. I am not an expert in this area, but I know for a fact that like there are countries who are working on ethics frameworks, which is helpful to think about. And apart from that, I think there are two other approaches. One is talking to customers. If you start talking to customers, you feel more empathetic in some way to their needs, and it's a personal connection sometimes. Like you also feel like you're adding value ultimately. So I think that also helps in not ensuring that you're not exploiting in any way. And then last is thinking again from an empathy point of view. I as a user, right, like I get annoyed when certain companies do certain things, and so like how do I ensure that I don't do the same when I'm like building products? I think that empathy is important, some ethical frameworks are important, and also like regulations. I think it's a combination of all.
Good insight. Maybe last question within this particular domain. We talked a little bit around metaverse, augmented reality. And one of my previous guests mentioned a phrase that really interested me, is that as those things become more of a reality, how do people who are consumers who are still using these products, how can they still differentiate between what's real versus what is happening in a different reality? Because when you're in this particular reality, that's your world as you observe it. Is that something that you think is something that product development should be involved in? So should there be, if you're in a virtual reality world or in an augmented, should there be some kind of a disclaimer saying, guys, this is not real. This dragon is not actually flying there. It's not real that there's a lion in front of you. How do you deal with that? Because from my perspective, I've been testing out all these kinds of new and cool technologies. Sometimes it's so real that I cannot even differentiate anymore. So should that be built into products, some kind of a disclaimer saying, guys, what you're watching is not the reality?
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting topic, and I mean, we could spend hours on this. But like to quickly get to the point, like one, there is a philosophical question as well, like, what is real, what is unreal? Like in some way from, even there are like Hindu scriptures in India where it says like from Bhagavad Gita, like everything is an illusion, and then there are people here who are Matrix fans, or I think people who have also called out that, we are already living in a simulation. I think Elon Musk had said this, where he says with the rapid advancement of, AR, VR, we'll get to a stage where we can't differentiate between real and unreal. So maybe someone has already done that, and now we are in a simulation, so which is like a very strange thing to think about, but it could be, who knows. But I think even if you take about movies, right? Like if you watch a movie triggers certain emotions, and they are meant to do that. Like, even though you know that you are watching a movie, you know that you are in a cinema hall, for that brief moment you forget and they connect with the protagonist and you hate the villain, or you like the villain, who knows? But there is like certain emotions that are triggered. So I think forget virtual reality, augmented reality, even movies have that effect on people, and they're meant to have that effect on people. And then you also see instances where social media, people are getting affected by hurtful comments or bullying and things like that. So with augmented and virtual reality, I think because it's even more immersive experience, I think it's more natural for us to feel emotions in that environment. So I think companies should totally
Very,
take
very
that into
interesting.
account.
So this is a topic that we probably can spend another hour about talking, but unfortunately we're almost out of time. I just wanted to ask you one last follow-up question. As you know, with the Enterprise Big Data Framework, we're trying to build this global community of ambassadors, which is growing ever since the framework was launched. And I would be honored to invite you as an ambassador for the United States. Would you accept my invitation?
Yeah, for sure. I think you're doing some incredible work in terms of bringing various experts together and helping ultimately everyone learn. So definitely would
Thank you
love
so
to
much,
be part
Harish.
of it.
And with that, thank you so much for participating today in Big Data Talks. It's been an absolute pleasure from my side to kind of hear your words of wisdom. And I personally learned a lot. What I always like around these conversations is that it's not really an interview, but it very quickly becomes a conversation where I really had the opportunity to pick your brain and your expertise on certain products or certain topics which I find very fascinating, and especially with your wealth of experience within product development. So thank you so much for being on our show today, and you definitely contributed to the way in which data is changing the world. Thanks so much.
Yeah, I love being part of this conversation, and I think the best conversations are where it helps me trigger new ideas as well. So as I was speaking, I also thought of like new ideas. So pleasure was mine as well.
Thank
So
you.
thank you so much.